Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this extraordinary Planning, Transport, Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of September, 7 o'clock. First thing on the agenda, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's no apologies this evening.
Brilliant. I've not received any items of urgent business today. Have we got any declarations of interest?
Yep, sorry, Chair, it was just a quick one. I know DP World have referenced quite a lot in Stamford-le-Hope train station. I'm obviously employed there, but I have discussed this item in the past with no problems, so just declaring that. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm making a slight change to the running order today, and we're going to move the draft Thurrock design charter to the end of the evening. So we will go on to, yep.
Sorry, I'm quite against that. And the reason I'm against that is that the rest of the agenda will take time, and I think it needs to have time. Whereas the Thurrock design chart, I think, can be done beforehand. It needs to be scrutinised because it also goes hand in hand with the local plan when it comes here as well. So if we get this out of the way and done, like properly now, then I think that the officers that are involved can go and we can have a proper debate where we're not rushing against the time that we've got to have the design chart at the end.
Yeah, there'll be a proper debate, but I do want to get these big items done first, okay? But I appreciate your comments, okay?
I just don't think it's fair on the
That's
officer
okay.
to sit here. He's a junior officer as well.
Yeah, but that's the decision I've made on this, and that's where we're going to go with it.
Well, I think it's the wrong decision.
Okay, and when you're chair, you can make those decisions.
Well, when I'm portfolio, I might be a bit different.
It does work, yeah. Just that sorry, Councillor Watson, if we're not done by 9, I've got another appointment. That's all. All right, so I might have to go.
Understood.
Sorry.
Brilliant. So can we start then with item 5 as listed on the agenda, the Stamford-le-Hope Station interchange and update.
Good evening, councillors. I just want to start with a short statement, if I may. When I first sat at a PTR Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, I think it was back last December, and some of you were here, we talked about the quality of reports on these regeneration projects, the lack of detail, the focus on the positives, and the, frankly, ignorance of the negatives. And I gave you a pledge that when we came back with reports on these projects, that the detail would be there. It would be clear what the council had done, what it hadn't done, but would also put forward some clear views on where we should go next. So these reports, the next 3 on the agenda, are not pretty reading and read alongside the best value inspection. They're an indictment of the way the council has managed regeneration projects in the past. But I hope you'll agree, and I'm well aware that you will have questions and challenges across the course of this evening, but I hope you'll agree that these are a significant improvement on what you've seen in the past about these projects, and that they also offer some clarity on where we can go from here. So I talked to others, and I think I said this to Councillor Watson in a portfolio briefing. This is a little bit about sort of fessing up as to where we are, which we haven't been good at in the past, and then hopefully moving on and making sure that we do not make the same mistakes again, and that these projects are, where it's appropriate to deliver them, moved forwards. Where we need to look at alternative options, we move forwards with those. So, as I say, they're not pretty reading, and we're happy to be challenged and questioned on those comments. But as I say, hopefully you will see a way forward with considerable work still to be done on each of these projects. So Kevin is with me, and obviously is the report author, has the detail on the projects. I'm sure you'll have read them all. But Kevin, do you want to just give a quick recap on where we're at and what the key recommendations going forwards are, and then we'll welcome your questions and concerns.
Thank you, Mark. So this report follows on from the update that came before the committee on the 6th of December. It updates that position, particularly around phase 1. At paragraph 3.5, we talk about sort of the conclusion of the phase 1, the station building tender, and the reasons why that ultimately wasn't successful in terms of actually being able to actually enter into a contract with Mace. That in itself actually activated a review which ran parallel with the best value reporting, where we looked at where we were with the project, with the excessive expend to date in relation to the overall budget. The decision was to protect the existing SELEP funding, retain it, and to do that we had to focus on securing the design for phase 2, which is the interchange element, and then provide a new business case, and as part of that business case is revise the costings for the project. So we actually knew in totality what the actual costs of the scheme were, not working on estimates, but working on basis of proper designs. So that's what we've been working on in terms of actually doing that. Within the report is a summary of the phase 2 work to date, which is based on the design work for the interchange. We've been looking through 3 options, and option 2 has been selected by stakeholders, and which is retained, which is the provision of a fully integrated interchange, which is summarised at Appendix 1, which is design option 2. This meets the requirements of the funding, SELEP funding, in terms of actually provides for the bus interchange, it provides the parking, provides the cycle stands, it provides the taxi and the drop-off spaces. In terms of actually the other options, this one that can be delivered, we've learnt the lessons from the previous scheme where we've gone into pre-apps and found out that the scheme was too expensive or couldn't be delivered in relation to impacts on water courses and such. So this scheme is actually now where we've successfully worked with the stakeholders to actually get to a scheme that we're confident that will actually secure a positive planning outcome. As part of that, under revised costing, under the financials, under the revised costings, we have looked at the costs of these schemes. We've gone back through at Appendix 2, we've got the revised costings for phase 1, which is the station buildings. It is an exempt appendix on the basis it's working around some tender pricing that was submitted as part of the phase 1 tender. But that indicates the cost increase for phase 1 plus the cost for phase 2. Ultimately, that sort of indicates that to complete the scheme in phase 1, phase 2 in its entirety with option 2 would require an increase of £5.6 million on the current budget. In terms of actually where we go next, in terms of actually we're looking to submit the planning application towards the middle of October. We're looking to get the business case submitted to SELEP independent review by end of November, and then that report would be considered by the SELEP Accountability Board in February 2024 with the recommendation that the funding is retained. I should also add, as part of this review, we've actually looked at phase 1 again. We've been working with both strategic stakeholders in C2C and Network Rail, and then examining options for alternative delivery of this scheme. And obviously those discussions are currently active, and once there is any outcome or results from that, those will form part of further report back to this committee.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to open to questions. I'm sure everyone's got a question on this, but I just want to... Go for it.
I just wanted to make one point. Kevin's referred to additional budget requirement for this project. I just wanted to make it clear that the intention is that that will not be additional cost to the council. And indeed, we hope to deliver the project without any further cost from now to the council. And the aim will be to secure and retain the SELEP funding and also use Freeport funds to take this forward. So I think that's an important point to make, bearing in mind that there has been some comments that we're looking for additional money from the council here. What we're looking to do is to deliver the project, but to ensure that both the SELEP funding that we have allocated to the council at the moment is retained, and that Freeport funding is sourced to deliver the remainder. There's a clear link between Freeport and this project, the connections of both the bus services through to DP World, the connections for the active travel routes with the cycle infrastructure that is provided through the Section 106 with the TEP project. So we're confident that this is something that it would be appropriate for funding coming out of the Freeport business rates would be appropriate for. So just wanted to add that.
Just before we ask questions, I just want to make sure that if members want to mention anything on this pink paper, obviously we need to go into closed session. So if you could indicate that you want to discuss something from the pink paper, then please do so before you start asking questions on it. Now, I'm really, having gone to some of the scrutiny training recently, I've picked up the importance that, although a lot of mistakes have happened, we do need to look into, learn lessons, but also drive forward and make sure that we don't use a disproportionate amount of resource looking back and stymie progress. That said, I do think it's very important that we go to some major issues with this project, major issues which before the BVI have not really seen the light of day, not really been discussed and not really been acknowledged. And one of the major points, and I think one of the most startling points in the entire BVI, was put forward in the letter that the Chief Executive, the email that the Chief Executive sent in 2019. And she wrote, having found out the problems with the project that apparently she was unaware of up until that point, she said, or wrote, "I have read the note," and this was the report that had been produced by the consultant, "and I find most of it unbelievable. How can there not have been a project meeting for a year and a half?" Now, can officers here, and I know it's probably uncomfortable talking about some of this stuff, can officers here make any comment on how this situation occurred in 2019 and 2018? Because I think people deserve to know.
Obviously, neither Kevin and myself were with the council at that time, and I agree that it is incredible that a project of this scale did not have a project meeting for that length of time. I'll pass over to Kevin as to whether he's been able to ascertain any detail or reason for that. I suspect that meetings were ongoing, but that they were not minuted or shared, because it would not have been possible to continue with the project without some form of meeting. So I suspect it is more a lapse of governance and openness and transparency, and we've talked a lot about that in this chamber recently, rather than the fact that there weren't meetings happening. But Kevin, have you got anything to add?
Yes, I think it's apparent in terms of the reviews of the regeneration programme as a whole that individual projects had adopted over time their own reporting structures. And with Stamford Le Hope, a decision was made back in 2019 to appoint Mace as our external sort of project management team. And Mace actually did run the meetings and minuted the meetings. So meetings did take place. Unfortunately, as Mark has pointed out, those weren't subsequently relayed back through to the council.
Thank you for that. I've got some other points to make, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. So I think it was Councillor Anderson first, and then who's... Members could indicate who would like to go next. It'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Chair. I will start off, Mark, by thanking you for your opening statement with regard to sort of the candid nature of this report. It doesn't make for pretty reading, but you are right. I mean, in the past, our reports have just been utter tripe, marinated in garbage. I mean, just absolute nonsense. And these do seem, to me, the reports in tonight's agenda represent sort of a change in tack. They're not great to read, but they're honest, right? So thank you for that. In terms of my questions, the first thing I wanted to raise is we had a report, I think it was one in December, the meeting in December on this, and it said that to continue to secure the CELEP monies, the council was required to complete the design for phase 2 and revised business case for consideration at the June 23 CELEP Accountability Board. We're looking at going to the, February 24 Accountability Board. What's that, 7-8 months after we were originally supposed to go, and apparently we were required to present it then. I'm a bit concerned as to why there's a 7-month gap there. I couldn't see any reason in the report. So that's my first question. I will just ask my second before you get on to answering. And you said something previously, Kevin, that sort of piqued my curiosity about this particular scheme, and that was that the Daybreak Windows site had been purchased, obviously, in order to facilitate the construction of the station building and the interchange. But as part of the design work that was to take place, colleagues would be looking into sort of how much space would be needed to actually deliver this, and that there could possibly be capacity for development on the site in order to provide receipts back to the project. And just curious, I didn't see again anything in the report about that. So I was wondering if that had been looked into and what the conclusions were if it had been.
Yes, Councillor Vice Chair. We did, in the report that was put to December, we did put some timelines down, and those were based on our assessment of where we were in terms of actually the ability to actually to appoint ACOM and get the design work completed. That took longer than we anticipated in terms of actually where the Section 114 notice and the implications for expenditure. And in terms of actually just appointing ACOM and getting them up and running, and then and getting the team together, it has taken longer. It's been a much more complicated for a small scheme. It's ended up being much more complicated in terms of bringing the actors together. In terms of actually going to CELEP Accountability Board, CELEP have taken the view that they'd rather set a date which they could actually realistically get to, rather than, as that has happened in the past, putting unrealistic dates down and then we don't achieve those. So they've given us a long stop date of January. We could have gone to November, but then it's realistically to achieve what we need to do and get it in place and have the time to reflect upon the work, make sure it's right. That's how we did. In terms of actually the design work, the ambition is to maximise value for the council here, in terms of actually looking at options, in terms of actually the interchange. We have worked with adjacent landowners or developers to see if there is potential for developable plots around this. It's become apparent in terms of actually the design work we've done with stakeholders to achieve the outputs, the funding outputs in terms of the bus interchange, the retention of the parking, the numbers as we needed to, and all the other elements in terms of the scheme, is that we require most of the day break window site, and there's not a lot left to actually to be as a developable piece, and if it was, it'd be landlocked as well. So what we've done is we've looked at it, but at the end of the day, the principal objective of securing the site was to deliver the interchange. That's what we're seeking to do.
I think Mark wants to.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of points to that. Kevin and to a lesser degree myself have worked very closely with SELAP across the period to reassure them that we are heading in the right direction and that therefore they should continue to allocate this money to this project. There were points at which there was a danger of them saying you're not going to be able to deliver, therefore we will take the money and reallocate it. But we've worked very closely with them. They are reassured that we're heading in the right direction. The next milestone has to be met, but the previous ones we've worked around by giving them that reassurance. And I think to expand on the daybreak windows point, we can say nothing more than the original aspirations to fund part of this through development were over ambitious. There was never going to be a lot of value left after you delivered a viable interchange. There may be a little, but the idea that you would get a significant development there without further investment in site assembly was naive at the time. So
we're fairly, very super confident that we get to February 24. We're fine with that, and we expect that business case will be approved.
We are on track as it stands. If that changes, we will be open and tell you. But we're on track as it stands.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit of a basic question, and I'm sorry if it's been asked before, but this is my first PTR. But perhaps, is it fair to say that the station was demolished prematurely?
I think the very short and very simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the report. And the reason I say thank you for the report is because it's warts and all, and that is exactly what we want to do. Because all the reports that have come before, previous to you and previous to this, has always been about the good news stuff and covered the stuff that has gone wrong. So I welcome the fact that it's now on the table for everybody to see, and we need to continue that if there's an issue. So one of my questions is, today we've spent £13.5 million. Does that take into consideration a cost to the daybreak windows land as well? So that's not additional anywhere else?
Yeah, for the benefit of those online who may not see a nod, yes.
Okay. And the second thing I really want to be guaranteed, Chair, if that's right, I want a guarantee, is that we are not in the position as a council where we were on the A13 when all of the risk was laying within the Thurrock Council itself. That's why, how we structured that contract, it ended up that we had gone up with an overspend of 64 million. That can't happen again on any scheme that we do. And also, I'm a bit confused how we got the 7.5 million. So you must have put the business case in, I'm assuming, without it coming back to scrutiny like we asked originally.
No, the business case is yet to go in,
Right.
but the allocation hasn't been taken away pending that business case. We haven't submitted a business case that you haven't seen.
Right.
It's just that what SELEP made an allocation for this project. It's been at risk all the time. We haven't had a deliverable project. We have persuaded them that we will get there, but we haven't submitted a business plan, which you haven't seen. And we tonight is talking to you about the next steps. In terms of the position vis-a-vis, not wanting to be in the same situation as the A13, the contract with AECOM is a design contract. We haven't entered into a construction contract, and we are investigating all options as to who is the right body to deliver this.
Right.
Those conversations are ongoing with Network Rail and others, and C2C, and therefore we do not want to get into a position where the council is delivering a project that it doesn't understand with a contract that doesn't control the risk.
Are we absolutely confident that even though the fund is for 7.5 million, are we absolutely confident that we will receive that money through that business case?
Just to clarify, the funding has already been allocated to the council. The council's
But you said it was based on the business case. So if the business case is not up to scrutiny, could they claw that 7.5 million back?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, if the business case is actually not approved, there is the risk. Obviously, is that with all grant funding could be clawed back. However, we're confident that where we are at the moment in terms of the design and the business case going forward. I would appoint at this point, and it is a factor within the report. We talk about under the financial also financial implications, that we've done the review, and it's quite clear that we can't deliver the phases 1 and phase 2 within the remaining monies, and that additional funding will be required. Now, additional funding will be required, and we need to be identified, and actually identified within the business case going forward. So that is a factor that we're having to deal with. But as has been pointed out, we are in discussions with both SELEP and Freeport about identifying the funds that we would require to deliver the scheme, and those are active discussions at the moment.
So, thanks, Kevin. I think what I'm trying to get is absolute clarity that obviously we can't leave the train station as it is. It's just shouldn't have been pulled down before we had the money locked in or a contract made. We've got residents at Stanford-le-Hope and those use it that's got like a platform, and we've got to do something. And what we need to be reassured of is the fact that the funding, even though you're going to go to DP World and you're going to try and get it from all other areas, which I'm grateful you are going to do that, we have got to do that. There is no choice but to do this. So I just want to be confident that the business plan is so robust that even though that's been allocated 7.5 million, we will get that through that business plan. They will not say that it's not good enough. So you need to ensure that that absolutely happens. Otherwise, we're looking for 13 million, not the 5 million on top. And because whatever, this has got to be delivered for the sake of those residents. And I think that's where I'm looking at you as the experts, as we all are. You've got to get this over the line. There is no choice on this.
Yeah. We understand that. And I think it's important to note that the report that's before you and the report that goes to Cabinet are recommending next steps. They are not the final approval to deliver this. A further report will come forward when we are clear on that, when we're clear on what the other funding is, when we're clear on what the delivery option is, and therefore we are able to make it clear to members what the risk to the council is at that point, and obviously we'll seek to minimise that. But we fully understand that this is a project that needs resolving and that we cannot leave Stanford-le-Hope without a resolution. So we understand that. We're taking it a step at a time. And the first step is to explain where we're at, explain where we're going with the design, explain what our intention is regarding funding, and at the point when we've resolved all of that, to come back through the process and get approval to get on and get it built. But we fully understand that for members, not coming up with a solution is not an option.
So I look in with the plan that it's going to, a planning application is due to come to planning. Is that online for the second phase to come this next month, well, October, in a couple of weeks?
Yes, Chair. I mean, we are working on the basis that we'll have that application submitted in mid-October. That's fresh off the press today. So all the work is, all the consultant teams are working towards that. And the pre-apps have happened. The technical work has been completed. The transport studies have been done. And we're working for that submission.
Okay, fantastic.
Chair, just to confirm, that's for the interchange. The work remains to be done for the station itself. Is that correct?
The station itself, phase 1, has already got a planning consent. So it's,
Councillor Hartstein.
Thank you. Councillor Watson just asked the question I was going to ask about the planning actually going in for October. For the moment, before I come back possibly, I know it's a practical issue, but talking to the reports, I know that option 2 has been decided, but could we have them a bit bigger next time? Because I can't read that at all. I know it's already been decided, but I literally cannot see what I'm looking at on that. So I don't know if from a practical perspective, perhaps next time we could have it on A4 or something, please, if that's okay. Thank you.
Chair, I could get bigger drawing sent out with the minutes.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. So just to check, the station, does that have to come back as well? Because I understand that's close to expiry. Is it got a 3-year limit? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Kelly, yeah, that has got a 3-year consent, and it's due. I think the consent it runs till June 24. So that's been identified as a risk. Obviously, we're looking at options to deal with that and mitigate that risk. But obviously, that's part of the wider planning.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, and it picks up on looking at these maps. Obviously, they are quite hard to read. I remember when we first looked at the station, the design in 2017, I thought it was a little bit more impressive back then. But here, obviously, we've purchased the daybreak window site. I think there was obviously a general consensus we might be able to get a bit more out of that. For me, I think the parking looks quite light at the moment in option 2. I think you're really got to try and maximise that land if there's no further potential development there. But it is quite hard to read, and it is important because effectively what we're looking at here is parking spaces and a vehicle turnaround for buses, and it's quite a lot of money to purchase that site, and we want to try and maximise the value there. So, because we had the parking already, what we didn't have was the turning circle, and it was a lot of money. So for me, option 2, it's just the sort of questions you're going to get at planning, I think, is if you can, you need to try and maximise that parking. But it is difficult to read. I don't know, I mean, if you're saying you're going to submit an application sort of mid-October, I don't know if there's time to change, but it's just the sort of things that might come up at planning to try and maximise value from that site, because effectively we've purchased it, and all we're getting is a bus turnaround and some spaces. Thank you.
Just in response to that, yeah, I mean, we have looked to maximise the development of the scheme, but it's a balance. One of the reasons why the previous scheme, which was not supported, I should add, from the planning, because it was his impact on the environment in terms of the flood zone and the Mucklin ditch. Has been an issue in terms of actually it's a balance between actually developing land adjacent to the Mucklin ditch and actually costs. So what we've tried to do is balance out some of the most expensive elements of the scheme. We've used the natural topography of the scheme to deliver the scheme to manage some of the costs. And by doing that, we've actually have had to not so much compromise the parking, but you know, it's about rationalising it. I would add the existing car park, as you know from Stamford Hope, is actually, if you laid it out now, would meet modern standards in terms of actually it is what it is, but it's with the chevron parking on one side and the parallel parking along the railway side. That's not modern standards. So what we've had to do is go back and apply the standards what we would apply to a new build to this scheme. So it's actually making it easier for the existing customers to use, and that's a balance in terms of actually the design parameters. So hopefully what you get is something which is actually usable and actually and will be well used. But it's a balance between that and some of the costings. And I think where we were before, and I draw the committee's attention to the previous scheme, which was in excess of 6.6 million, which was undeliverable and didn't reflect the nature of the environment.
Any other questions from the floor at all? Councillor Maney?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Councillor Kelly said, I'm a bit concerned about the parking. I can see here, is it 17 upper level and 26 lower level? Is that what it says? So 43 spaces. 2 disabled, 4 staff, and drop off 2. Drop off 2. Disabled 2. Okay, thank you.
I'm not going to make comment on the age of any of the members in this room, but I think there's probably only one of us who's still of an age to have the eyesight to be able to read that map, to be honest. So apologies for any offence taken on the floor there.
Just a comment, drop-offs could be better then. If there's only 2 spaces, obviously it's a big town, you're going to have a lot of cars waiting around. Maybe if you could fit some more drop-offs, that would be welcome. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair, that officers are used to working regularly on digital format, which means you can enlarge, and obviously we remember that generally members get circulated paper copies. So as Kevin has already indicated, we'll make sure that larger versions are circulated, and when we work with democratic services, we look to enlarge them when they're circulated to you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be a little pedantic again and just ask that next time the RAG risk rating table comes to us, that half the progress and actions box isn't cut off. You struggle to get through that, whether online or not, because we seem to have cut off half the box. So if we could sort that out next time, that'd be great. And I just wanted to echo something Councillor Watson said, and that is just the absolute imperative nature that, you know, we get this right and you know, make sure Stamford gets its station. I'm in no way sort of diminishing, you know, the failures in other areas of the borough, you know, like we've got tonight in Grays, etc. But there, they have stuff that works. It's been there for ages, and it's not broken. We're just looking to improve it. It's like renovating your house. What we've done in Stamford is sort of walked into the town. We've walked into a house, smashed it up, smashed it to pieces, built a couple of glorified sheds, and said, you know, we'll build you something better at some point in the future. That's not good enough. So we need to make sure that we get this right.
As I've said before, absolutely, we understand that. And I said, yeah, I believe, in my opinion, the station was demolished before there was a deliverable alternative.
Councillor Hartstein.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the 5.6 that's needed, obviously that's not been sourced yet. So would I be right in thinking that if you can't find it, it's going to be down to the local authority to fund that because we're going to have no choice?
That would be a decision for Cabinet at the time, but in the current climate, that will be challenging, and therefore we will work as hard as we can to identify alternative sources.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Regarding the cost of the project, so we've gone up from 12 to 29. Now, I know that there must have been some proper analysis done about where those costs come from. Now, I fully understand, having worked on some development projects as Cabinet Member for Housing, the impact that inflation and the cost of materials has had on cost projects. But I think what hasn't been made clear and needs to be made clear is how much of that extra cost is down to errors that we've made and not macroeconomic factors. And that's not in this report. And I think it's very important, you know, where we've commissioned work, stopped, paused, done more work that wasn't good enough, bought stuff that we shouldn't have bought, done exploration. How much does that cost? And I think it's really important that we have a figure on that.
Yes, Chair. If you recall the report that was brought to you 6th of December 22. Within that report, and we'll recirculate that, we did break that down into the spend that was the spend by the design spend on the previous design, which was the main station on the southern side, and we actually split that out in terms of actually what had been spent before the revised strategy. So I can't recall what it was, but I can get that figure out, and it will form part of the next stage, if that makes sense. We can.
Brilliant. Have we got any? If you were to look into your crystal ball, and that's because it's there's people watching this, hopefully, that you know, because they're having to suffer going through. I know that there's. When are they going to have a station, and what are the major risks at this stage to prevent that deadline from being met?
Just to work on the current programme that we're dealing with in terms of actually securing the planning consent and the business case. I think to a certain extent we're now looking to submit the planning application mid-October. The business case, the planning application by mid-October. The business case will be completed by the end of November and gone through validation. In addition to that, we'll actually identify the funding. So we've got a planning risk. That consent will be secured. Hopefully we've done enough due diligence and we've talked to the right people and we've got the right design this time. In terms of funding, we will actually talk to, that discussion is starting to take place with Thames Freeport on the active funding. There's available funding there. We're also having an active discussion with CELEP about funding and reallocations within that. I would draw the committee's attention that CELEP is due to disband by March 31st. So there's an opportunity in terms of actually that to look for the reallocations of funds to projects which are live and which are a priority for the council. So in terms of actually we're looking to move that forward. We're confident we can get those dates and meet those deadlines. In terms of actually the next stage, we are, as has been mentioned, we are in active discussions with C2C and Network Rail. I think it's quite clear from the reviews of all the regen programmes, the council is possibly not best placed to deliver some of these large capital infrastructure schemes, particularly when there's a level of expertise is required, particularly with rail-facing schemes. We are in active discussions about how that can be remedied. Those options will be brought forward as part of that wider review. Time is tight. Time is not going to be our friend. As Councillor Kelly has pointed out, we've got a planning consent that's that's due to expire in June next year. So we need to deal with that as a risk associated with that. So we are conscious that there are dangers to the project, but we're equally confident that we're now moving in the right direction, and we are having active discussions with our funders, because at the end of the day, as CELEP have indicated, they are fully supportive of the scheme, and they want to see it delivered. And I think that's a positive environment we go into with those wider discussions on funding.
I just wanted to comment because I'm conscious Kevin hasn't answered part of your question. And I'm not going to answer it fully. What I'm going to say is that this project and other projects delivered by the council have a history of underestimating budget and being over-ambitious in terms of programme. And I'm not going to commit to a programme or commit myself to give you a programme until I'm 100% confident in what that programme will be. And we're not there yet. We've got a bit of work to do, both in terms of getting the planning application through, as Kevin's described, working with funding partners to secure those, and identifying the delivery model. And until we've done that, any programme would be nothing more than a guess. And I'm not going to go there because you've been misled in the past, and I'm not going to be one who does that to you again.
Thank you. I appreciate that candour. I'm more concerned for when Councillor Anderson's finally going to get to use a proper station. I think, echoing what Councillor Watson said earlier and what Councillor Anderson said, the purpose of these meetings is to finally, get a realistic view of these projects, both historically and going forward. And from the papers that I've seen here and from responses from officers, I think that we're starting to achieve that. So I will thank you for your candour, both in written word and in your answers. And I'll have, on that note, I have one more question from Councillor Watson.
I've just got one more question, and it's deviating a little bit into the other one, but I just want to ask that. Have you already had conversations with CELEC about diverting the Grays underpass scheme into the money for that into Stamford Hope Station? And are they okay with it?
Yeah. Yes, I think we've started that broader conversation, and then obviously the Grays report is up next, and part of the risk associated with that is that if the scheme doesn't go forward in the form in Grays, then there's a potential for clawback, and what we're looking to do is, and bearing in mind, as I mentioned, that CELEP will disband at the end of March. They're looking at options in terms of how that money could be reallocated within existing schemes. It's not realistic for new schemes to come forward in the period of time for them to actually do a business case and an assessment. So they'll be looking for schemes which have actually which have already gone through a business case process and are actually live and will be supported by the accountability board. So it is early days, and I say that because we've not had that sort of the detailed discussion, but it has been raised with them as part of that wider discussion as to how we review all our programmes with CELEP.
Brilliant. I think just before I go on to the recommendations, I'd just like to say that I think with these projects going forward, I think it would be helpful if with the next stages of them, because they're quite technical in places, I think it would be really helpful for not just myself, but all members to be offered a pre-meeting with a reasonable amount of notice as well, because often some of these pre-meetings are offered with far too little notice and, schedules don't mix. So I really would like to see everybody given the opportunity to attend pre-meetings, not just myself, and vice for these projects going forward. So if everyone's happy, we'll move to the recommendations. There are just two recommendations to note. recommendation 1.1 and recommendation 1.2. Is a committee happy to note these recommendations? That's agreed, so thank you very much. So, some more fun. We'll now move on to the Grays Underpass update report. So, officers, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Where to start? In terms of actually, I think it's the pertinent point in terms of this report is actually the reference to forecasted costs. Back in 2017, the forecasted cost for this project was 27.4 million. By 2021, it was forecasted at 37.3 million. And then the most recent estimate from costings that we received from Network Rail is that the cost now of 46 million. In terms of actually the funding balance, the bulk of that, well, outside of £10.8 million, which is part of a CELEP local LGF fund grant, and £700,000 from Network Rail, the bulk of that money, or all of that money, is coming from the council. I think that's telling in terms of actually the balance of funding and the balance of risk on this project. In terms of actually the balance of benefits, I think it's out of kilter. In terms of actually the reviews that have been undertaken and are set out in the report, it's shown that the scheme has become too ambitious in terms of actually its scope. It's become far too technical in terms of actually the requirements of to build it, the buildability. And I think more salient, in terms of value for money, just a straightforward value for money estimate, if you apply this, set out at paragraph 3.14, is that when this project was originally went through a business case assessment back in 2019, it had a BCR of 2.4 to 1, which basically means that it would be supported. In 2022, a value for money update was undertaken for CELEP to reassure them about funding, and that came back at 2.1, and that was based on 37.3 million. I'm quite confident in saying that if we were to do another value for money check on current values, we would fall well below the 1 to 2 ratio that's required to retain the CELEP funding, and to view this project as value for money. With those factors being considered in conjunction with the reviews that have been undertaken, the recommendation that officers are making to Cabinet is for the current scheme in terms of the underpass design is actually is stopped. The planning application is withdrawn. As part of the review, we have spoken to strategic stakeholders, Network Rail, key landowners in the town, who have indicated that the ambition for the scheme didn't tally with their regeneration objectives. I think through those discussions with Network Rail Strategic Property, there was an option to actually work with them about to bring about the requirements for a new crossing point within the town, which does away with the level crossing, but could be delivered as part of an integrated scheme, including the new station. And the recommendation is that we work with Network Rail to assess the viability of that proposal, and going forward, we bring that back to this committee and to Cabinet to actually to report on the viability of doing that as an option.
Chair, just to add. I think it's important to note that the latest costing is the first time that an actual scheme has been costed with proper input from Network Rail. And I think that's really important. Yes, over the course of this project, there will have been inflation, and obviously that's been significant recently, and other factors. But it's the first time that the project has been properly costed. And Kevin talked about the balance of funding. Yes, there are regeneration benefits to the council in delivering this project, but there are enormous benefits to Network Rail in solving a challenge, and the simple original balance that they were paying, 700,000 against many millions from others, was not right. There are opportunities around the station for significant regeneration benefits for the town centre as a whole, and previously we'd been focusing on one issue, which was the level crossing, and not focusing on what is the opportunity that comes out of a regenerated station quarter for Grays. So it's clear to me, it should be clear from the report, that that is a project that does not deliver viable benefits. It perhaps should have been nipped in the bud before now. But if it wasn't, there is no point in our view in pouring good money after bad on that scheme. We bring it to a close, accept that that doesn't look pretty financially, but that it is the right thing to do, and now have a proper dialogue with Network Rail, with other parties who are interested in the regeneration of the town centre, and come up with a scheme that delivers far more in terms of benefits than simply addressing the level crossing in a way that blights a significant part of the rest of the town centre.
Thank you very much. I mean, I had a brief discussion with you before this meeting about this, but I think when you see that figure, I mean, I lived in Grays for about a year or so, like right in the town centre, just around the corner, used that level crossing probably 2, 3, 4 times a day. And when you think of the actual proposed project, what we're actually doing, and then you look at a figure of 46 million. I mean, you can do all the analysis you want over value for money, and you have to do that technical analysis, but just from a layman's point of view, like it just screams out, doesn't it? £46 million to change a level crossing to an underpass. That was pretty much undesirable anyway. So again, it is. I couldn't. I'm completely in agreement. To cease immediately. It's an absolute no. I don't think I've ever made an easier decision since I've been in council on this matter. But again, what were, for your perspective, having looked at this project, look back, what were the major errors that the council made that got us to this stage?
Again, obviously I wasn't here, but look, if I had been involved in this, I hope I would have brought this paper to you a lot earlier, and I hope I would not have had to bring this paper to you. But I do think that a decision on the preferred option was taken without a view on what the wider regeneration benefits could be, and without a proper understanding of the costs of the various options that were available earlier on. And I'm aware that there were conversations about improved bridges, lifts, and other alternatives, which have been successfully delivered at many other stations in much less time than we've been talking about doing that here. So I do think there was a rush towards a project that was perceived as being different, novel, and having wider accessibility benefits, and I do appreciate that is potentially the case here. But I think, I'm beginning to repeat myself. I do think that a decision on the option was taken without a full understanding of its cost, its implications elsewhere in the town centre, and the cost of the alternatives. And I think had there been a proper consideration, a proper options appraisal, and a more robust governance around that decision, that it might have come out with a different outcome that could well have been delivered by now.
Very much, Councillor Watson. Oh, apologies.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Councillor Anderson. I'm so sorry. Councillor Anderson, sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. This subject, this particular project, is actually, I think, a really good example of some of the absolute jokers that used to come to this committee. Some of the reports they used to give us back in mid-2021, I think it was. We had a report on this come to committee. And in that report, one of the recommendations asked us to approve a cost plan that didn't exist. There was no cost plan in the report. Committee obviously rejected that recommendation. And I think it's just a really good illustration of you know, the absolute jokery that you know, some of these reports have been in the past. So again, thank you for you know, bringing a report that's honest. Good start. Just a quick comment from myself. Page 72, it's referring to the alternative design approach, and that is the station quarter approach. And in paragraph 4.3, I just saw you know, a few words that jumped out to me and sort of scared the life out of me. And that is referring to, you know, the possible project to build a new station. It mentions the use of external consultants. You know, we've used a few external consultants for a station in Stamford and spent quite a bit of money on them. And you know, so far there's not been a spade in the ground. So I know this isn't sort of in any way sort of developed at the moment, so you probably can't comment much. But if we do go down that route, and we do look to use external consultants, and I just want to say now that we need to be really careful and you know, look back at the mistakes we made with Stamford, the mess we made with that, and make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thank you. 100%. A council that is investigating projects such as this and such as the others is always going to need to rely on some external advice. But what it needs to do is make sure that it's clear with its brief, it's clear with its instructions, and that it manages those consultants effectively. I have always said, I've been involved in this game for quite a long time, that a consultant is only ever as good as his client. And if you're not a very good client, then your consultant will take advantage of you. So we have not been a good client in the past, and we need to make sure that we understand what we are good at and what we're not good at, and where we are not good at it, we bring in the right skills, but we manage them well. One of the things that this council will need to do is develop its ability to commission and manage other people doing things, rather than what we've done in the past is try to do everything ourselves. So I agree with you. We will need to, at the appropriate time, give you the confidence that we are capable of managing consultants, contracts, and partners better than we've done in the past.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. So, thank you for your report. This report angers me. And the reason it angers me so much is that I was on PTR in November 2021 when Councillor Anderson was the chair. This report came the day before Cabinet to the committee with no cost and half-baked, where the person couldn't even tell us what they were proposing to do. And sitting on that committee at that time was Councillor Kerrin, whose ward it was being infected. And we were assured it would come back. And so we asked for the report to come back, and it never saw the light of day back at PTR, and yet it was agreed. So back then, I knew it weren't going to happen because there was no cost plan. There was nothing. So I'm annoyed the fact of quite a few things, but it's not down here. So first of all, 6 million has been spent on this project. 6 million, that's not a small amount. 1920, 3 million, £3.5 million was spent on what? The SLEP money we're due to be clawed back. That's why I'm hoping that we can get it transferred, if that's the case. We've still got 353 in outstanding contractual commitments. Can you just tell us what they are, please? And my last question, because I like to do it all at once and then get it out of the way, as everybody knows. The shops past the crossing down to Costas, I think it was, on each side, they were consulted to say this was going to happen. And so we started losing people out of those shops. What are we going to do to put this right for the shops? How are we going to consult with those shops again that this isn't going to happen and some of those shops can stay, if not all of them up to that crossing? How can we make it right to them, and what will be the consultation process? Because the last consultation process there was they've got to move for this underpass. Thanks.
I'll let Kevin pick up on some of the cost points, but I can pick up the last point if you...
Just in terms of actually the breakdown of costs, obviously, the bulk of that is actually has been taken up with actually fees associated with the scheme development. I would point out that there's in terms of actually the report at the financials, there is a footnote includes land purchased for CO3. That was approximately £1 million plus fees for which was allocated for out of that 3.6 million in 1920.
So, hold on, sorry, I sound like a broken... Land, will you purchase the land to build this building when I thought this was our land anyway?
No, in terms of actually the land envelope that was used for this building and adjacent, there was some land that wasn't actually in the council ownership, but it was actually purchased to deliver this building. That's my understanding in terms of actually speaking to that's why its reference is includes costs related to CO3 land purchase. And there's approximately £1 million was spent on land purchases.
So the shops weren't in our remit. The memory garden that was here was not in our remit. This was, we bought this land purposely to build this building.
I haven't got the details in front of me in terms of actually the land ownership per se. In terms of actually the breakdown, in terms of the spend, it was about £1 million that was spent on land purchases in connection with right. CO3. I could find that information, Chair, if that would be helpful in terms of actually the supplementary element of that. The question is that the 300 contractual commitments is actually to Network Rail, and it's for work that's already been done but not invoiced, and it's one of those. It's difficult because we wanted to stop the work and we have stopped the work, but it's just stopping it at an appropriate stage outside of our contractual commitments. I would add that there's no further work been undertaken on that by any consultants on the scheme, and there hasn't been for significant time in terms of actually the recommendation.
Chair, if I may add a little bit on the land issue here. It's my understanding that the majority of this site was owned by the council, but there were other interests in part of it. Whether it's for a separate review into this building as to whether that land value was the appropriate amount, but it was allocated to the underpass project on the basis that the aim was to regenerate this part of the high street, and that having a council office fronting onto it was part of that aim. As I say, it's not for this report to debate the rights and wrongs of that, but we want to report that as part of the cost allocated to the project, some land was there. In terms of the businesses affected, then certainly, yes, there are businesses that have had to move. There are other businesses that have been in abeyance in terms of future investment as a result of this project going on for a long period. In terms of those to the north of the tracks and the road, I suspect that it's probable that the impact of whatever we come up with next as a solution may be significantly less there, and therefore we absolutely need to start a dialogue with those businesses about what their future plans are. Now, obviously, as part of those plans, there was a proposed redevelopment of some of the high street, and that might still be appropriate, but as an independent scheme, different from this. So we do need to have that conversation. Those businesses that are to the south of the station, particularly in that sort of temporary block with Dillon's Fish and Chip Shop, it's highly possible that those would still be part of a redevelopment scheme. And, you know, to some extent, we had started a dialogue. I was approached with one of the businesses, by one of the businesses that was there, who were frustrated that they weren't able to progress some investment in their business, and they wanted to know how long this was going to continue. And I was open and honest with them and said, we are likely to make a decision to pause the current scheme. This site is likely to still be of interest for a future project. And at this point in time, I can't confirm what that will be and when it will be. And we had a productive conversation about what their options were. And as it happens, that business has made a decision now. It's closed. The parents who own the business have retired, and the daughter that ran the business is pursuing alternative options because they've been waiting for the council, and I was clear that, you know, they needed now to make up their own mind and move forward. So we've started a more honest dialogue with people. We've said to them that, you know, because I think part of the problem with this and other projects, and we'll come on to Purfleet, is that people have been told it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow, it's tomorrow, just wait a bit longer, it's tomorrow. What they haven't been told is that actually there are a number of steps that we need to go through, and there's no certainty in any of this. And you can choose to wait, but you may want to consider your alternative options. Our openness and honesty doesn't need to stop at these walls. It needs to get across the road and start talking to those businesses. But clearly what we wanted to do was get to a point where we can offer some certainty about whether the current scheme will go ahead or not, and then start that dialogue. As I say, for some of them, there still won't be any certainty about when or what, but at least there will be others that perhaps can get on with different decisions. You're absolutely right that we do need to look at what we do there. There may be claims for blight. I don't know. We haven't investigated that, but actually I suspect that the opportunities for some of those businesses will outweigh that. But we'll have that dialogue, and we will report back. I've no doubt that you will want us to be reporting on a regular basis, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. And we'll build that into those discussions, because it's not just our decisions that are affected, it's those of other businesses.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Why can we not put much more pressure on Network Rail to lead on a solution?
We are absolutely going to.
Okay.
As I said, and as Kevin said, the balance of cost versus benefit, there are, as I said, there are benefits to the council from resolving this, but there are significant benefits to Network Rail. There are significant benefits to the rail operator, C2C, whether that's in terms of health and safety, whether that's in terms of revenue protection. It's a big issue for them, and a potential solution to this resolves that. But ultimately, it's their level crossing, and if somebody, if there's an accident on it, it's you know, we would all be very upset, but it's their level crossing, and therefore the balance of how it should be funded needs to change. And one of the things that we have talked about with portfolio holder and others within the administration, and we've talked about within SLT, is that jointly we need to be putting that pressure onto Network Rail, but alongside that, having a constructive dialogue with them, so that you don't, you don't bark at somebody but don't help them solve it, if you see what I mean. But we haven't tended to do that, as I say, in the past. We've seemed to have accepted that that's what was on offer, and we seem to have accepted that the only thing we needed to solve was the crossing, when there are other opportunities that an improved, redeveloped station could deliver. I'm sure many of you will be aware that government has been putting pressure on Network Rail for some time to use its land assets to help with the housing delivery. We haven't had that conversation with them. Why not? I don't know, because I wasn't here, but we are now starting to have that conversation. And as I say, look at what are the opportunities here, and where does the balance of funding sit? And in our view, a lot more of it should sit, if not the bulk of it, should sit with Network Rail, and potentially there is the opportunity for them to fund that through development around the station that also benefits us.
Councillor Hartstein.
Thank you. It's not wanting to labour the point, just to make sure I've understood it correctly then. So apart from the site acquisition, which is land we're sitting on, that's the rest of the 6 million is gone. That's it. It's gone. Yep.
Yeah, that 6 million is actually spent, that's gone out the door. So it's actually it's a combination of actually fees. Well, we've obviously in the past the council's had quite considerable external interims working on this project, and that's been very expensive option for delivery. And the rest of it is actually fees to consultants, to Network Rail. I mean, I would say that we've gone through 2 design processes with Network Rail and different contractors because of the timescales that have been involved, and they're changing contractors. So it doesn't make for pretty reading, but they are actual costs.
Yep. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Yep, thank you. So just a quick point. Obviously, the original project, it wasn't, when you mentioned about the cost there, it wasn't just an underpass, it was sort of the whole regeneration of that part of Grays, but obviously we've moved on from that now. The fundamental issue of the crossings is still in existence, so, and I think one of the biggest issues are the train traffic, and that's going to increase dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years with the freight trains. So with Network Rail, obviously they're going to be net beneficiaries of those trains coming in and out, so they're going to obviously make a lot more revenue. But the fundamental issue is that when these trains come through, the towns are cut off from one another. Big issues at East Tilbury, obviously West Thurrock has got its own designs in place for the regeneration. So whilst obviously the project's on hold, it is vitally important to stress that this issue is going to get a lot worse over the next 5 to 10 years. And obviously it's fantastic that we're getting these freight trains in because they take HGVs off our roads, but ultimately, yeah, we're going to have a solution in place. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this design is, this quarter design. But yeah, if we think it's an issue now, it will be even more so in 5 to 10 years. So yeah, it's really important that we crack on and hopefully come up with a good solution. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to the point that in parallel with working with Network Rail, we also need to be lobbying Network Rail as a whole, and working with other partners to do that. But yes, there's great opportunities elsewhere in the borough for using our rail network better, but it means we have to solve this as well.
Anyone else on the floor? Or are we all good to move on to recommendations? I mean, this report is, you know, it just presents a catastrophic failure of a project. There's no other way round that, accepting that. So we'll move on to the recommendations, and there are a couple of recommendations to note. That being 1.1, which I will read out because I think it's just for the benefit of people watching. The Planning, Transport and Regeneration Overview Scrutiny Committee notes the action to cease further development work on the underpass scheme and withdraw the planning application. And then there's 1.2 that goes on to deal with some of the more technical and legal matters. So are committee happy to note those two recommendations? Noted. We'll now move on to agenda item 7, which I know we've got some interested parties in the audience this evening, which is the Purfleet-on-Thames Regeneration report. And I'll hand over to officers to present.
I'm going to pass over to Kevin again, but with the chair's approval, if I might be excused from the chamber for 1 minute for a personal discomfort issue.
Very nicely put. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This report deals with an update on the Purfleet Centre Regeneration. It's fair to say that the current development arrangements haven't delivered what was expected in terms of actually numbers of homes and then periods, and there's a number of reasons for that, and I think it's a combination of actually where the market has been over the last 5 years. We're in a down cycle. I think the impact of COVID have impacted that as well. Cost inflation has been a factor in the last couple of years. I think the partnership as well in terms of PCRL. I think there's issues in terms of actually Swan Housing have all combined as a whole to make it very difficult for funding to be secured for the scheme. But ultimately, it is the persistent failure of PCRL to actually to bring that additional funding to the scheme to actually allow the unlocking of portions of or sections of the site that have resulted in Homes England on a regular basis issuing the council, because the funded agreement is with the council, not with PCRL, and Homes England is with us. The risk sits with the council, and that's quite important to understand that. So in terms of actually, they have issued what's called a reservation of rights letter. It's saying you're not delivering what you said you would do as part of the agreement. We're reserving our rights to cancel that agreement, and we may do at a certain point. But if you don't do that, well, now we've got to the point where I think the 9th reservation of letter has been issued. I think we're now at the end of the road in relation to their willingness to extend that latitude. I think there's a material risk that the council, that Homes England could legislate or take the council to take legal action against the council to recover the funding that's been spent to date, and that totals £27 million approximately. So there's a real risk to the council, and within the current climate, that's not a risk that officers can ignore or certainly not draw to the attention of the cabinet. So the recommendation is that, working with Homes England and PCRL, is that we would seek to mutually agree to withdraw from the development agreement. If that's not possible, then we would obviously exhaust that avenue. But if that wasn't possible, the recommendation is that we withdraw from the agreement with Homes England. Homes England have indicated that that's the case, then they will not seek to claw back the funding that has been expended to date. They will commit to meeting an element of the funding to date that's outstanding. And to achieve that, we would have to enter into an agreement 10 days after the Cabinet, if they were to make that decision on the 11th of October, and enter into a deed to achieve that. As a supplementary, obviously, we have always been keen to work with PCRL in terms of actually options. And one of the options that has been brought to us was the potential for English Cities Fund, which is a consortium of Homes England, but not the funding side of Homes England, Legal and General, and Muse, which is a housing developer. Now, we believe that there's some merit in that discussion in terms of actually looking at whether that consortium could deliver or could be engaged in an active discussion about delivery within the context of the existing development agreement, but importantly without the HIF funding attached to it. Now, the recommendation is to Cabinet is that we would work with that consortium over a period of 3 months, give them a time limit to actually work through, and see if that was viable, and we would report that back. But I think where we are at the moment in terms of actually, it's quite apparent that the current development agreement is not delivering what it's meant to deliver. And in terms of actually the risk to the council of clawback from Homes England, that's an active and live risk if we don't actually withdraw from the agreement, either mutually with PCRL or if not with them, then by ourselves. So the recommendation reflects that, Chair.
Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your patience a few minutes ago. I wanted to make a couple of points. One, in relation to the money spent to date and what that's been spent on. And I think that's important because of some of the comments about some of the earlier reports. In Purfleet, the majority of the funding we've received from Homes England through the HIF and the money we've received from CELEP, there's around 5 million that was received for CELEP on this project, and 5 million or so of the council's own money that's been spent on Purfleet. We have actually bought a significant amount of land, which continues to have value. We have delivered enabling works, remediation, and the likes. And that is a key reason why Homes in England are not seeking the clawback and have agreed with us not to do that, because actually that is laying the groundwork, in some cases quite literally, for a project in Purfleet to happen. But there is a broad recognition that the current development agreement and vehicle is not the right one to deliver it in the current climate. I would question whether it's been the right one for a while, but it certainly isn't at this point. But, as I say, there is that recognition that what has been spent to date lays the groundwork for the council with other partners to come forward and take it on. And I think that's really important because there is a suggestion that a lot of public money has been spent and not a lot to be seen for it. Now, I fully appreciate that as a resident of Purfleet, you don't see a lot of that at the moment in the way of regeneration, but as I say, it is really important to note that that money has largely been spent on things that are of value to take the project forward. And then to expand on English Cities Fund, English Cities Fund, as Kevin has said, is a partnership between Homes England. They are a 50% partner in it. Legal and General, who obviously through their investment arm provide a significant amount of capital, but they also have an interest in housing delivery. They have their own housing delivery arm. And Muse. Muse are part of the Morgan Sindall Group, a very sizable property and construction organisation that have joint ventures with councils in many locations. And importantly, that combination of particularly Legal and General and Homes England means that many of their aspirations around regeneration, housing delivery are more closely aligned to our own than perhaps may be the case with a more typical house builder. So we're not saying there is a solution there, but there is strong interest from English Cities Fund. PCRL have agreed, following our representations, to identify them as their preferred partner to move forwards with, and we'll continue those dialogues. That may or may not result in something coming forwards. Some of you will be aware that PCRL recently published their accounts. Their accounts are not healthy. There is a real prospect that that PCRL will not survive. That produces other options. So whilst we will be pursuing those negotiations to see whether there is an opportunity for English Cities Fund to step in, we will be looking at all other options as to how to take this project forward. But without labouring the point, whilst this paper does not make pretty reading along with the others, actually there is something here we can move forward with. And we just need to find the right vehicle to do that. And as I say, closing the HIF funding down in a mutual way is absolutely the right thing to do, in my opinion. That's why we're recommending it. And it gives us that platform to move forwards. But yes, as with the previous reports, there are lots of opportunities where you should have been much more open with in the past. There are earlier opportunities to have made similar decisions. But as with the others, and I know this is a cliche, we are where we are. We're trying to tell you as clearly as possible how we got here, and point to some directions as to where we go from here.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's been a bigger open secret regarding any project more than this, that this project's been dead in the water as it stands for many, many years with the current partners. I mean, it's just been like an accepted truth that this isn't going forward. So it's frustrating that we didn't get to this point probably 3 years earlier than we have. We've got as we had overambitious plans to start with. Then we had a massive financial impact from COVID and inflation, and we've got a partner who cannot secure the funding required to take on a project of this size thus far. So I mean, I am reassured. I mean, we've bought land. Presumably that land is worth more than what we bought it for, perhaps. Come give me some joy during these reports. But I mean, what are we looking at in terms of land values compared to what we've paid for it?
I can't give you a figure off the top of my head. I will share that with you. We have had, as part of an assessment of all of our assets, a view on that. I will share that view. I have no doubt that on the projects that we've discussed before, there are parcels of land that we bought at significantly inflated prices. I think that's less so here, and that as a regeneration site, these are closer to what they're worth, and possibly with some surplus. But I would be, I'm racking my brains to remember and failing at my age, so I would rather come back to you and let you know what our view is on the current position. But I don't see that there is something that's a major issue in the way that one might argue that, for example, a site at Stamford-le-Hope was undoubtedly paid more than would have been the case, and that's been aired previously in the BVI inspection as well. But I will get some figures back to you.
I mean, we're talking about as prime bit of real estate, and a piece of an area in this borough that has got more potential than almost anywhere else in the borough. I mean, that area, if built on properly, could and should be the crown in the jewel in the crown of Thurrock, just because it's positioning on the river, its links to London. So we must be able to. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that there is a partner out there that can deliver what we need to deliver. But it must be, as I say, we've got some interested parties in this room. I can't imagine the frustration that they and the councillor for the ward councillor who's here with us today, Councillor Watson, share over what has been a terrible disappointment, because it was such an exciting project. And I know there are there's always a legal delay in getting into contracts is difficult enough. Getting out of them is even more difficult and even more precarious. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, again, this is another project that it's essential that when we do get movement, we do get pre-meetings and everyone in the committee involved at the same level as Cabinet would be when they're making their decisions on this. I didn't miss you, did I? You're not going to be mean to me. Councillor Watson.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for the report. It's a bit of appeal for all the residents of Purfleet-on-Thames. So the whole thing I've got to say about this is why I'm so disappointed is the scheme was designed by the residents. A lot went into that for the residents. They were promised how the station would look, the riverfront would look, shops that Purfleet lacks so badly, and all this will come in. What I am slightly, my sort of like brightness on it is a little bit is that we can do something. And I want to do something. I want to do something to hold those values for Purfleet-on-Thames residents. I know that the chair's sitting and the vice chair's sitting up there, and they've put a lot of hours on meetings and everything else to do this. So I am grateful that you're holding those other conversations with the English City funds as well, and to get them on board, because I'm pretty sure, like Councillor Spillman has just said, it is the jewel in the crown. It is on the riverfront. We could get an Uber there, and there's so much potential sitting there that it can regenerate the whole entire Purfleet-on-Thames. So, pains me to say, but if we need to sever the ties, that's what we do. But on the back that we have got something to go for, so it is not just left as it is now with a load of hoardings round and hardly anything being built, because that's not what it's supposed to look like. So I just need your guarantee on that, and that the land that has been bought, that was bought for the scheme originally, will remain as a parcel of land for a scheme of that calibre to come forward, hopefully in the same sort of ethos that the residents want. And can I also say that anything that we do on that, anything that we go to the residents and we speak to them and consult with them, because as I said, this is probably one of the first schemes that was built by the residents. Thanks.
Response to that. Firstly, can I point out that Kevin's done most of the lifting on the report, so whilst I appreciate your thanks, a lot of that needs to go to Kevin. Yeah, I can't give you any guarantees at this point of view, other than to say that it is my view, as with yours, that this is a project that has legs and that we need to find a way to deliver it. You'll be well aware, as will those in the gallery, that I have made pains to come and see the community, to attend the community forum, to stand up in front of them and be honest and open about where we're at. I've subsequently been out with the chair and vice chair on a tour of the area to understand a little bit more about it, because there's no substitute for local knowledge. I have committed to come back and engage with the community whenever they want me to, as long as I'm available. And I'm adopting that approach across other communities in the borough and attending community forums. So absolutely, as I said when I stood up in front of the community, there might be bits of the scheme that we need to discuss tweaking with them, but that we'll have that conversation with them. And it goes back to my point about having conversations outside these walls. Yes, we've got to be open and transparent inside these walls. We've got to be open and transparent outside these walls. I've started that process with the community down there. I was welcomed to the meeting. I know there was a lot of scepticism when I arrived, and there still remains some, and the proof will be in the pudding, not in the talking. But we are committed to working with that community to make this work. I can't give guarantees about whether land that the council owns will remain in this project, because I don't. We make recommendations, not decisions, but I can guarantee that we will uncover every stone to find options that allow this project to deliver, alongside whatever options there may be outside, and that those will come to this forum, to this scrutiny committee as part of that process.
Anyone else? Brilliant. Well, on that sombre, but that sombre, but it is a sombre note, but hopefully this is the end of a very sorry tale, and hopefully we'll see the beginning of a much better future for this project, because as I say, you only have to walk through that area to understand what it should be already, and I hope that residents get to see what they were promised sooner rather than later. So on that note, we're happy to move to the recommendations, yeah? So we've got recommendation 1.1. On recommendation 1.2, are we happy to note them? It's causing mischief, isn't it? I've got the most mischievous vice chair you could possibly imagine. Yeah, thank you very much for that. And now we'll move on to, we'll go back to the report on the draft Thurrock Design Charter. There's no microphone on?
My apologies. I'll repeat that. For the benefit of those listening from outside, my apologies for not turning the microphone on. design charter forms part of a suite of documents that will ultimately form our local plan. Those documents talk about the policies, the infrastructure, and how we deliver it. But very often, the bits that people are most interested in are the maps that set out where development will be, and the policies that set out what it will look like will be. And the design charter is a key step in that. I'll hand over to Alec, who will briefly sort of talk you through sort of the background as to why we have a design charter, what it leads to, and what's in the document. I know some of you will have seen this at other presentations. For those who haven't, Alec will talk you through that. So thank you, Alec.
Thank you, Mark and Chair. So the design charter itself, as Mark explains, it sets out high-level principles and expectations for design quality, and that's for developments, infrastructure and placemaking projects throughout the entire of the borough. Its purpose is really to establish that shared language and vision for good design in Thurrock, and it's grounded in an understanding of the unique qualities but also challenges that the borough faces. The reason why we've developed one is that national policy has significantly changed over the past few years in reference to the importance of design, both within the National Planning Policy Framework, the publication of the National Design Guide, the National Model Design Codes. As a result, and with the opportunity that arises now of the emerging new local plan, there's an opportunity to refresh our existing design policy, which is currently contained in the Design Strategy SPD and the Residential Alterations and Extensions SPD. At the same time, it's worth noting that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which is at its final stages in the House of Lords, it seeks to create a new statutory duty on local planning authorities, and that is to prepare and adopt a borough-wide design code. Now, the design charter is very much the first stage within a broader programme of work working towards the development and adoption of a borough-wide design code. So whereas the design charter sets out high-level vision and principles for good development and high-quality places, a design code would establish a set of simple, concise, illustrated design requirements that provide really specific parameters for what constitutes well-designed environments. So for instance, that could talk about garden sizes, privacy distances between buildings, for instance, and these more specific things. So in terms of the charter itself, it's seeking to follow a process which has been set out in the National Model Design Codes as how you would go about preparing a robust borough-wide design codes. The first step of that is producing a vision and subjecting that to consultation to allow the discussion as to what are the priorities when it comes to the design of the environment in the borough. So the charter itself has been developed through reference to existing council strategies, including the Collaborative Communities Framework, Health and All Policies documents, the Emerging Transport Vision, as well as other documents that exist, and trying to marry that with national policy around design that's contained in the National Design Guide, also best practice such as building for a healthy life, building with nature standards, and these other aspects. In terms of the structure of the charter, it's been summed up around 4 key principles. That is pride in Thurrock, healthy places for all, connecting to opportunities, resilient and sustainable futures. Within each of those principles, there's a series of outcomes that seeks to highlight on particular issues that have been highlighted within the internal workshops of what could constitute a well-designed environment in Thurrock. Following on from that, the Charter presents 7 key design ideas. Now, they are 7 different examples of contexts that are both unique to Thurrock, but also generic issues that are faced within developments more broadly. And they seek to explore how these principles could begin to be implemented in these places in terms of a series of ideas that might be taken forward. Again, the point of the Charter is to be a high-level vision document, and it's expected that more specific parameters and guidance and coding would come forward in the next stages, which would be the production of a borough-wide design code. The final section of the Charter, entitled Making It Happen, summarises what the Council currently does to work with applicants to ensure high-quality development in the borough. It also sets out some expectations as to what we would like to see in a good design process as developers bring them forward to applications, but also pointers as to how applicants can ensure they put communities at the heart of their places through ideas related to consultation and engagement. So that is really a summary of the Charter as it stands, and just again to iterate that it's very much the first stage within a broader programme of developing a design code, and we're bringing the Design Charter to this committee today because we're keen to ensure that it's properly aligned with the local plan timeframe, and it can go out to consultation with the Reg 18 local plan at the same time to allow a joined up discussion. So, Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for this, but can you just, in layman's terms, give me an idea of what this document sort of does in practice? I'm just struck because, you know, we've got the National Model Design Code, we have a local plan, we have the Thurrock Design Strategy, and you mentioned a side note that will be required of the council when the Levelling Up Bill passes, and I'm just struggling to understand where this all sits within that.
Okay, so the most important thing is really about the emerging statutory requirement to produce a design code for the borough, which is coming out of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. Now, the design code itself can't be developed within a single go and put out to consultation. There's recommendations as to the process you go through that in order to make sure that it's robust and it achieves buy-up with the community and others. So the National Model Design Code, which sets the guidance for how you produce that code, it states that the first step is really about developing that vision, which is what this document that we're bringing to the committee today is all about. So it's setting the high-level principles that go on to inform what will be the more detailed requirements of a design code. So it's all about ensuring that there's consultation throughout all stages of the production of a design code itself. And in terms of the final status of that design code, the idea is that it will be adopted as a supplementary planning document to the local plan, so it will have real weight in helping to determine planning applications and decisions by giving both applicants but also members and the community a lot more reassurance as to a baseline level of quality that developments will come forward in.
Let me stew on that.
What it does, Councillor Anderson, right? What it does is that every part of the borough is different. So you've got the countryside, you've got the riverfront, every bit of that is different. And what the design standards try to do is incorporate that in the design of a planning application and how it looks. So for instance, if you're looking at in here, if you're looking at Grays, the design standards in Grays would be a lot different from them in Alsett, because Alsett is more of a village looking. So this sets the design standards for Thurrock, individually wards, on the way it looks like. So you would have something like, on the river, it tells you here on the river, why they want it is to be, you know, the heritage side of it is in Purfleet because that's got massive of heritage along with like Bramstrokes they're very pleased with, it's along the river so it's biodiversity, all of that sort of thing, living walls, living neighbourhoods. You know, if you go into Grays, yes you've got the river but you'd have it more synthetically built up, so you might have flats, whereas out in Alsett or Horns on the Hill, you'll be more bungalows and houses. So this is what this document does. It sets what the expectations if a developer comes into your area to build something in your ward, what would be characteristic right for your ward. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. What I'll say is that if you were to entirely contradict what Councillor Watson just said, I will lobby hard for your promotion. Did you want to add anything, Councillor Anderson, after that explanation? Does anyone have any questions regarding this? I'm sure the Chair of Planning must have a few things that he wants to chip in.
No, I have to say that obviously, look, design is subjective. We had planning last few weeks ago, and I think we had a disagreement as to what we thought was a good design and what was a bad design. So I do think it's important to try and keep areas well designed and together, but it will always be subjective. So the only other thing is, I think houses are built better these days, well insulated. I don't think they're not as big though. When you look at some of the council houses that were built in Tilbury in the 70s, you know, you had plenty of parking. They even come with garages now. They're very small, very tight, and I think it's the objective to try and squeeze as many houses into an area as opposed to actually look at you know, our parking, and parking is a bit of a concern. But these are national standards, and these are putting imposed upon us. So I think it's very good, but it'll always be subjective. Thank you. And there's not really too much we can do, but we're a local authority. These are national guidelines, and obviously we can put our opinions across, but we are subject to these design guides. Thank you.
I think so. I mean, I was involved in, obviously, the housing strategy. Now, these strategies and charters are not very tangible to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, or if the people that are listening to this meeting, this is probably the area where they just don't really understand what we're talking about and the importance of it. So I suppose building on what Councillor Watson said, and just for the benefit of, as this is a public meeting, what are the legal consequences? Because I'm sure there are legal consequences, but what are the planning consequences if we just said, we won't bother with this?
In terms of the planning consequences, the National Planning Policy Framework sets out an expectation that all local authorities would develop locally specific design policy and guides as appropriate. So if you were not to take forward the option of a borough-wide design code of quality standards, it may be that we look at design policy in a different way, or that we look at how we can produce design codes, particularly for strategic growth areas, for instance, or more specific areas of the borough. It may be a whole suite of approaches that becomes appropriate as the local plan is developed, and we get a better understanding of where development is likely to go and where the key design issues are likely to lie. So there is a broad direction in which this could go in, but that is very much why we sort of started with this first step of just setting out what could be the vision for this document. Then we can take it to consultation and have that broader discussion as to what that final design code looks like, how it can work, how it is best used, not just by applicants coming forward to de-risk the planning process, but also to help inform the work of planning committee and others, and provide that shared language and better sort of confidence to communities that the development that's going to come forward will at least adhere to basic quality standards. And just to pick up on Councillor Kelly's point as well, while some of this is national guidance, a lot of it is still very much open to being set locally in terms of what we're interested in, similar to parking standards and these other aspects. So I think there's an awful lot to play for within this. It can have an immense impact, both on the quality of development, but as I mentioned before, helping to de-risk development, because once it gets adopted by developers and they understand that it is enforced at the early stages, it helps inform the feasibility studies and capacity studies they do at the early stages to understand the number of houses they can fit on a site and hence the money they're willing to pay for the lands, for instance. So again, I think it's really important that it isn't just a vision, it's very much a delivery tool that helps bring forwards some of the more ambitious growth we have in the borough and helping to set that foundation so everyone sits on that shared foundation and language and helps, as I said, sort of de-risk things as they come through the planning process.
Yeah, I mean, as councillors, well, some of us do, some of us, it depends if you're interested in that subject area. I loved going through the housing strategy, because I'm a housing geek. So I loved every bit of it and going through it and reading through it and contributing to it. But it's still a very much internal document that we don't communicate, just like this, outside this building. And I really would say, like I said regarding the housing strategy, please make this document as human as possible. Please highlight, and Councillor Watson made a brilliant, because she was completely accurate about the report, and there's no way she would have ever, I knew she'd completely covered it all. I was just goading her. But she's entirely right. People need to know that we've produced this report to stop people living in hamlets in Thurrock from waking up and finding that there's a 15-storey high-rise being built next to them. We need to make people aware, because people's view of planning, we know what it is. Yeah, people's view of the approach that we take to Greenbelt. We know what the narrative is out there. And the thing is that the narrative out there is very different from the reality. Yeah. And that narrative's built up over many, many years. It's been built on by many, many years. Yeah. And we need to try and change that narrative to explain what we're doing to protect people's communities through documents like this. So not only do I want to, very interested in seeing how this document develops, but I really would like to see that, the language, that it made as human as possible, and for comms to become enthusiastic about it and embrace it, because people need to know that planning isn't just about getting developers to build a load of houses for someone else. There's so much more to it. Yeah? That it's about protecting communities. It's about protecting, our way of life and improving it as well. So please, like I say, make it as human as possible. And I'm sure, these committee members will do their best to promote it as well. And we can make, educate people a bit more about the whole process and about that planning isn't just a dirty word, that it's actually a positive word. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to say I absolutely agree. One of the challenges with the local plan process is that it is, as I said before, people tend to look at the maps and they look at the design stuff. And I agree with Councillor Kelly. There's an old saying, isn't it, that design is subjective, but quality is objective. And I think this is key to this, is that what we want to be able to demonstrate is quality. The local plan process is a lot of documents. A lot of them are very technical and have to be. And what we do need to do, if we're going to get people to engage properly in the local plan process, and not just when an application across the road comes in, which is how many people engage now, that we do need to look at the language. Necessarily, some of it has to be technical. Maybe the answer is to look at some sort of summary document as part of the comms, or how we talk about this around it. And we'll go away and look at that, because it's really important that people do understand why it's here. And it's absolutely, the point is you identify land on a plan to protect land that you don't identify. And you set design standards to make sure that what's built is appropriate and of the right quality. And if you don't have either, then that's when you're at risk. So we do need to convey to communities what this does for them in terms of making sure that development that comes along in their locality is appropriate for that locality, addresses all of the key connections and infrastructure requirements, and is of good quality. We can have a conversation about whether a particular design is your thing, but if it's of good quality, generally, most people will agree that that's the case. So I fully accept your point, and the key to the local plan is as much how local people understand it as how the development industry understands it.
Agreed. I mean, there's no point in having visions if no one knows what they are, do they? I mean, and no one knows. If you were to ask, it doesn't matter what policy. We hear vision all the time. We've got this vision, we've got that vision. How many punters out there, taxpayers, could tell you anything about a single vision that this council has produced over the last, since its existence? Probably, I doubt many councillors could. I doubt many officers could even. Yeah, it just, we need to do better at that. Councillor Watson.
So I totally agree with you, and we all know we desperately need a local plan to hold those developers in, but the design standard goes up against with that, so that we're not saying developers don't come in, but then you've got the justification on a local plan of where and what, and then they've got to go through a series of, do they meet what we're just putting in front of us? And if the answer is no, then it doesn't go. It's as simple as that. So we hold the visions in the local plan and this And if they don't listen to us, then it doesn't happen, does it? They've got to adhere to our local plan and our design standard.
That's the aim.
Anyone else? Brilliant. Thanks for that. We really look forward to seeing that develop. And thanks for your attendance this evening. So we've got 3 recommendations, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. They are all just to note. Are we happy to note them? Brilliant. Thanks very much. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. Thanks for everyone who is listening, and thanks for the people that attended previously as well. Thanks very much.